Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest nigger faggot.
About a month ago, I did a video on Anthony Fantano, aka The Needle Drop, and his brain-dead take on Jason Aldean's Try That in a Small Town. Like any left-wing snowflake, Anthony accused the singer of being a racist, despite a lack of any substantial evidence. But that was really just a preview of what was to come. Because as idiotic as that take was, it was nothing compared to his take on the Oliver Anthony song, Rich Men North of Richmond. The song went viral and was adopted by the right wing. And like the James Aldean song, I don't really personally care for it that much. It's not my type of music. But let's get into Anthony's completely unhinged take.
Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. Hope you're doing well. Let's talk about the right wing's new favorite country song. Comes from an artist named Oliver Anthony. Guy recently released a track named Rich Men North of Richmond. And this song has been going mega viral. Not just among the sort of psychotic, bigoted, weirdo, conservative influencers.
Whoa. We're already getting serious snowflake vibes.
And idiots who don't understand how the music industry works are freaking out because, oh my God, it's #1 on iTunes. Nobody buys music on iTunes anymore.
The only one that's freaking out is you, screaming racist about innocuous songs where there's no connection. And I actually do still buy my songs on iTunes. I know, what a loser.
No, this Oliver Anthony song has been getting exposure well beyond that, doing slightly bigger numbers than some mainstream artists get on new singles and music videos, and also spreading pretty far and wide on streaming platforms too. I was going to do a reaction to the track, but honestly, the performance is pretty straightforward, pretty dry. It's just some acoustic guitar, some vocals. The singing isn't the greatest I've ever heard, but it is good.
Dang, I actually agree with that for the most part. If only Anthony stuck to music reviews and stopped exposing himself as a complete idiot when it comes to anything politics.
And the playing isn't really what I'm trying to critique or pull apart here anyway. I figured this video might go down better or might make more sense if I just kind of go over the lyrics of the song.
Well, you figured wrong, because it did not go down better, judging by the fact that you got ratioed on your own video.
Living in the new world with an old soul, these rich men north of Richmond, Lord knows they all just want to have total control. Want to know what you think, want to know what you do, and they don't think you know, but I know that you do, because your dollar ain't shit and it's taxed to no end, because these rich men north of Richmond. Okay, now this is interesting right here. This is interesting framing and lyricism, because he's putting some very old and ignorant tropes down in a way that is super subtle, artfully subtle, to the point where I think most people wouldn't pick up on it or would be able to, like, write off accusations of whatever the mindset, perspective, or, political leanings of this track are.
The bigotry and racism is so subtle that most people wouldn't be able to pick up on it. But not Anthony, because he's smarter than most people. Let's let Big Brain Fantano interpret the song for us simple-minded people.
Pay attention to the line that the title is named after.
Rich Men North of Richmond. Rich men sounds like Richmond. Don't you analyze songs and lyrics for a living? How did that completely go over your head?
But more specifically, he's drawing a geographical line here as well, between north and south, using Richmond, Virginia as that dividing line. With that, you can't ignore the elephant in the room. He's like bringing up old, bitter, north-south ideological disconnections that go back to the Civil War era.
What the fuck? Clearly, it's written about politicians of Washington, D.C. You see that little map that you just brought up? Literally, above Richmond, it's written Washington, D.C. If you look at the map that you brought up. That and rich men sounds like Richmond. Are you getting it, Fantano? You know, Washington, D.C., where the White House is, where all the politicians go. I'm sure you've seen it on TV. Instead of this simple explanation, we have to go full Alex Jones and just invent this conspiracy of racism without any evidence, exactly as he did with the James Aldean song.
There's a lot of really bad and toxic and often bigoted political baggage that comes with, that North v South binary.
Maybe because he's not talking about a North-South binary. He's talking about politicians.
And also on top of it, it literally has nothing to do with the economic struggles that he's singing about in the first portion of the song. Rich men north of Richmond are not the sole reason that you're struggling economically.
So you're literally disproving your interpretation. Yes, the lyrics don't make sense if he was talking about people from the north, but he's not. The lyrics about economic struggle do make sense if he's talking about politicians.
It's the exploitative and solely profit-driven market system we currently live under, which is hurting everyone all over the country, regardless of what side of the Mason-Dixon line you land on.
Ugh, of course you gotta sprinkle in some commie idiot nonsense.
Which is pretty much a hallmark of right-wing anything. Get mad and get afraid over stuff that doesn't really impact your life in any way.
As opposed to what you do, just inventing racism to get mad about, where there is none.
Oliver Anthony, a guy who we talked about on this channel not too long ago, much to the dismay of many a commenter.
Oof. That ratio's gotten so much worse since then.
I was misunderstanding Oliver Anthony singing about rich men north of Richmond, and he wasn't drawing a north-south line. He was just singing about politicians from D.C. because that's north of Richmond, guys. But number one, Richmond, home of the Confederacy. So there's that, number one. And number two, there are politicians all over the country contributing to the societal and economic ills that Oliver Anthony supposedly cares about.
What a complete clown. There's politicians all over the country. Yeah, obviously, idiot. And they congregate in Washington, D.C. What was he supposed to do? List every politician from every state? It's going to be a pretty long song. And you just used the same logic 2 minutes ago.
Richmond, home of the Confederacy.
But what do you mean? There was Confederates all over the country. It's almost like, as Richmond was the home of the Confederacy, Washington, D.C. is the home of politicians.
But regardless, I talked about this in part in a clip that didn't make it into the original video.
He calls this an L editor moment. But if you do indeed have an editor, I think he was trying to help you. Because the clips that you're about to show, that he cut out, make you look even stupider than you did in the original video.
I don't think he just generally means politicians. There's politicians all over the United States of America.
Incredibly stupid. Yes, there are politicians outside of Washington. But let's give Anthony a free education lesson. This is what's known as a metonym. It's when you use a word as a substitute for something else with which it is closely associated. He's using Washington, D.C. as a substitute for all politicians. You can see, even in the definitions example, they use Washington because it's so common. Hollywood and Wall Street are other common examples. If I said, for example, Hollywood has a huge influence on culture, do you think I'm talking about the film industry in general, or just the geographical location of Hollywood? So Oliver Anthony is using Washington, D.C. to represent politicians as a whole. It's called symbolism, and it's actually pretty common in music. You'd think Anthony would know that, as someone who analyzes songs for a living.
I don't think this guy would have an issue with government generally if it were, espousing and supporting whatever ideas he believed in.
Everything Anthony said is stupidity, masked under a thin veneer of pretentiousness. Yes, he wouldn't have an issue with the government if they did what he wanted. Obviously. This is as stupid as me saying, yeah, well, Anthony would like the AM Arctic Monkeys album If all the songs were songs that Anthony liked. Yes, clearly. Anyway, this was hugely embarrassing for Fantano, and he should stick to music reviews. He's slowly but surely delving into more of the political realm as time goes on, and it's becoming abundantly clear that he's not cut out for it, in the slightest.